Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're doing a Naturia deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this one for you guys because this was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Dean. And this deck is a absolutely amazing deck that has one of the most powerful tribute summon monsters in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! In the form of Naturia Bamboo that can shut down 2/3 of your opponent's entire deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards like getting your name in the description of a single video, getting a signed card to the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron, all along with test hands. And definitely give Dean some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're playing 3 copies of Naturia Bamboo. So this card is a really good card in this deck. It has the ability that if you tribute summon this card using a Naturia monster, while this card remains face up on the field, your opponent cannot activate spells or traps. This card is literally a spell canceller and a Jinzo mixed into one card. That is absolutely insane. I love this card in this deck. The only downside of this card is you have to have a Naturia on your side of the field to tribute it, but we have plenty of ways in this deck to totally get around that, where you can tribute summon this card out really easily. We then play 3 copies of Naturia Antjaws, which is also kind of like one of the most powerful cards in the entire deck, because it has the ability that when your opponent special summons a monster, you can special summon 1 level 3 Naturia monster from your deck. It can be level 3 or lower, but that's a really powerful effect just to be able to constantly be special summoning out monsters from the deck. By the way, that's not once per turn. So if your opponent special summons out 5 monsters to their side of the field, you can special summon out as many to your side of the field as possible, which is really amazing. I love this card in this deck because this card helps out so much, and basically the entire strategy of this deck is based around getting out one of the 2 of these cards to your side of the field so you can go in for some absolutely insane advantage. We then play 3 copies of Naturia Maron. Maron is a foolish burial. When this card is normal summoned to your side of the field, you can send a Naturia monster from your deck to the graveyard, but it also has a very unique effect as well, that when this card is on your side of the field, you can target 2 Naturia monsters in your graveyard, shuffle those targets back into the deck, and then draw a card as well. So this card's really good just to be able to normal summon to your side of the field, give you a little bit of recovery, and give you a draw. We then play 2 copies of Naturia Fruit Fly. Fruit Fly is really good in the deck because it has the ability that all face-up monsters your opponent controls lose 300 attack and 300 defense for each face-up Naturia monster you control. And then once per turn, you can select 1 face-up monster your opponent controls with 0 defense and take control of it until the end phase, which is a great effect for this deck to have because then you can take that monster and use it for a link summon. We then play 2 copies of Naturia Mosquito. Naturia Mosquito is a pretty neat card in this deck too, because this card basically says your opponent, or while you control another face-up Naturia monster, your opponent cannot target this card for attacks, and your opponent takes any battle damage that you would have taken instead of you taking it for a battle that involves Naturia monsters. So for example, if I summon this card off my copy of Antjaws, and I summon it to my side of the field, and my opponent decides, hey, I'm going to attack into Antjaws, then they're going to take the damage and I'm not, which is really, really funny because a lot of times they won't know it until they attack. We then play a single copy of Naturia Rose Whip, which makes it so that your opponent can only activate 1 spell or trap per turn, which is basically like a miniature version of your Bamboo. We play a single copy of Naturia Butterfly. Butterfly has the ability to negate an attack because once per turn, when your opponent declares an attack, you can send the top card of your deck to the graveyard to negate the attack, which comes in very handy in this deck. 1 copy of Naturia Stink Bug because it has the ability that when a face-up Naturia monster you control is selected as an attack target, you can send this card you control to the graveyard to negate the attack and also end that battle phase, which is really good. I really wanted to play this card at 2, but I wanted to have 2 different monsters in the deck, so I actually changed out one of these for Naturia Butterfly. We then play a single copy of Sunflower. Sunflower comes in very handy as well because it has the ability that you can tribute this card and a Naturia monster to negate the activation of an effect monster's effect your opponent controls and destroy it, which is pretty good to give you also monster negation on top of locking your opponent out of spells and traps. We then play a single copy of Naturia Beans. Naturia Beans comes in handy as well because this card basically says it can't be destroyed by battle, and it also has the ability that it inflicts 5 turn points of damage to your opponent when this card is selected as an attack target, which is pretty good because comboed with your copy of Mosquito, where it makes it so that your opponent takes any damage that you would have taken, you can put this card in attack position and attack freely 1 time with this card per turn to be able to do some serious damage against your opponent because it only has 100 attack points. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing some amazing techs in this deck. So we're going to be playing a single copy of the Super Magic Swords. You might be looking at this card and going, wait, what does that do? Well, this card is a great card to combo with your Yugioh because it has the ability at the start of the battle phase, you can change the equipped monster's battle position. And if you do, immediately after this card resolves, normal summon a monster to your side of the field, which can normal summon out your copy of your bamboo to your side of the field when you change the battle position. But it also has a very neat effect as well, that you apply the effect depending on the position of the monster that you have on the field. If it's in attack position, your opponent cannot target that monster with monster effects, and if it's in defense position, it can't be destroyed by battle. So you can essentially protect your copy of Yugioh from being destroyed by battle as long as you have this card on your side of the field equipped to the Yugioh and it's in defense position, which is really good because it protects your monster, and the more monsters that your opponent summons, the more Naturias we get special summon from the deck. We then play a single copy of Power of the Guardians. Power of the Guardians is really neat as well, because if an attack is declared involving the equipped monster, you place one spell counter on this card, and the equipped monster gains 500 attack and defense for each spell counter on this card. And if the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can remove a spell counter from this card instead. So it makes it so your monster really can't be destroyed by battle or by card effect, which is very good for us. We then play a single copy of Moon Mirror Shield because it makes it so that your monster always has 100 attack points higher than the monster it's battling, which is really good for this deck to be able to make that happen, because sometimes you will have a monster like Bamboo Shoots that is very vulnerable to being destroyed by battle, but this card protects it from being destroyed by battle because when you equip it, it can always have 100 attack more. We then play 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods for the last 3 spells. You play very few spells in this deck. You just play the 3 equipped spells and you play the 3 Foolish Burial Goods, because Foolish Burial Goods is actually essentially a search card for the deck, because this card will let you send a card that's a trap card to get you a search that we'll get into in just a minute. So that's it for the spell cards. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're playing 3 copies of Trap Trick. Trap Trick essentially turns all of our trap cards in this deck into 3 ofs, or excuse me, into like 5 to 6 ofs in this deck, because this card has the ability to banish any normal trap from your deck, except another copy of Trap Tricks, and set the same card from your deck that has the same name. So for example, if I were to banish a copy of Storming Mirror Force from my deck, I could then set a copy of Storming Mirror Force to my side of the field, which would give me the ability to activate that card during that turn, because it also has the ability that that card can be activated the same turn it was set, but you can only activate 1 trap card for the rest of the turn, which is usually going to be the one that you set. We then play 2 copies of Storming Mirror Force. Storming Mirror Force has the great effect that when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you return all attack position monsters your opponent controls to the hand, which comes in very handy for us because, again, the only way that your opponent's really going to get through the copy of your bamboo is when they attack through it or they activate a monster effect. So this helps it from being destroyed by battle. We then play 3 copies of a amazing tech card in this deck, and it's 3 copies of Free Range Monster. This card is really weird for this deck, and it's really a weird tech card, but it's essentially double summoned in a trap form, because during the main phase, immediately as card resolves, normal summon or set 1 monster. So you can activate this during your opponent's turn. Say, for example, if you open up this card, a copy of any Naturia monster, and a copy of Bamboo. You can set this card to your side of the field, normal summon the Naturia monster, and pass. Then your opponent goes, immediately activate this, tribute the Naturia monster, and summon out your copy of Bamboo. Now no spells and traps for the rest of the turn. That's a really insane thing to be able to do, especially with a surprising tech card like this. We then play 3 copies of Back to the Front because it will revive back the Naturia monsters that we have in the graveyard, because usually they send themselves to the graveyard to activate their effects, or they send another Naturia to the graveyard to activate their effects. Example, kind of like Sunflower, where it negates a monster effect by sending it to the graveyard, or Stink Bug. This card can revive those cards back to your side of the field to also give you the tribute materials to summon out your copy of your Bamboo. We then play 3 copies of Armory Call. Armory Call is the reason we only play the equipped spells as a 1 of in the deck each, because it lets you add an equipped spell from your deck to your hand, then you can equip it to 1 appropriate monster on your side of the field. So this card essentially lets you grab the exact equipped spell that you want of the 3 and equip it to your copy of Yugioh or your copy of your Bamboo, which is really good in this deck to be able to immediately equip those to those monsters, because essentially all of them kind of do the same thing with protecting them from being destroyed by battle or protecting them from battle and card effect. We then played 2 copies of the Naturia Sacred Tree. Naturia Sacred Tree is a 2-of in here because its main effect, I never really want to see this card in my hand. But what the main effect of this card is if this card is sent to the graveyard, you add a Naturia card from your deck to your hand. That's the really big effect of this card, which is why I play the 3 Foolish Burial Goods, and you're usually only ever going to send this card to the graveyard off that effect. However, if you like the other effects of this card, I'm not a big fan of them, but you can actually drop a single copy of Back to the Front to play another copy of Sacred Tree. And Sacred Tree also has the ability that you can tribute an Earth insect type monster, special summon 1 level 4 or lower Earth plant monster from your deck, or you can tribute a Earth plant monster to special summon a Earth insect from the deck. So it lets you tag your insects and your plants out, in and out from the deck, which is a pretty good effect, but at the same time, I'm not too concerned about it because Antjaws is usually the one I'm going for when I search for this card, which is just going to let me swarm the field anyways, so I don't really need that effect. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. And the extra deck, I will say you don't super have to have it because basically the entire point of the deck is to get out your copy of your Bamboo, but the extra deck does have some really interesting cards. So we're going to be playing a single copy of Naturia Beast. Naturia Beast basically is here because it lets you negate spell effects by sending the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, which is really good to negate any spell effect. Play a single copy of Naturia Barkion. Naturia Barkion has the ability that during either player's turn, when a trap effect is activated, you can banish 2 cards from your graveyard, negate the activation of that card, and destroy it, which is very good just to immediately negate a spell or negate a trap with these 2 monsters. 1 copy of Trishula. I figured it was a hidden arsenal deck, so this card would fit right in this deck. But this card comes in very handy because it has the ability that when this card is synchro summoned, you get to banish 3 cards, 1 from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard, which is really good just to be able to banish those cards. 1 copy of Borreload Savage because it gives us additional negations by using a link monster that's equipped to this card. It gets different amount of counters on it depending on the link rating, so it just gives you different counters that you can negate cards with. So this card comes in pretty handy to deal with monster effects. 1 copy of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon does actually come up every so often in this deck. It's not all that often, but it's here just in case you can go for it, but it does negate monster effects, which helps out a lot, especially with your Bamboo on your side of the field. 1 copy of Riser Dragon. Riser Dragon is a card that I summon quite often in this deck when I play it and go into the extra deck because it actually will level manipulate so I can go for some other synchro monsters in the deck. So this card comes in pretty handy. 1 copy of F.A. Dawn Dragster basically negates spells and traps. 1 copy of Herald of the Arclight because it can negate anything, which is really good. And a single copy of Formula Synchron because Formula Synchron will let me go in for other monsters in the deck, and it lets me draw a card as well. We then play a single copy of Access Code because Access Code gives us all the pops that we need. You can change this out for Borreload if you want to change it out for Borreload or Borrelosaur because you will with Antjaws inevitably get that many monsters on the field that you can go directly into that monster if you need to for an OTK piece. Play a single copy of Unicorn to spin stuff, Phoenix to pop spells and traps that your opponent is not going to be activating anyways. 1 copy of Crystron Needle Fiber. Needle Fiber comes in handy because it actually lets you go in for Riser Dragon, or it lets you go in for your copy of your Formula Synchron to get you a draw, which is pretty good. 1 copy of Mrs. Radiant because Mrs. Radiant rates the attack of our monsters by 500, which comes in pretty handy in this deck. And then finally an IP Mask Granted to let us link summon during our opponent's turn. I will say though, you don't have to play everything that I showed you in the extra deck because I don't usually go for the extra deck all that much in this deck anyways. So usually you're just summoning out your Bamboo Shoots with an equipped spell equipped to it and then just going after your opponent with that and all the monsters that you're swarming the field with your copy of Antjaws. The ones I do highly recommend is the Trishula, Naturia Barkion, and Beast because these 3 are the ones that I found myself summoning the most, along with my copy of Crystron Needle Fiber and Unicorn and IP Masquerade. Those are the main ones that I usually found myself going into. So these can kind of be interchanged with the synchro levels, but I totally recommend these levels of the monsters because they let you go in for the widest variety of levels depending on what you're going to summon to your side of the field. So that's it for the deck, guys. It's a really awesome deck to play around with. I'm really glad that Dean actually suggested this deck because it's super fun to be able to play around with. And it's really amazing to always do hidden arsenal decks. I love hidden arsenal decks, especially this deck because I have never actually profiled this on the channel and I'm looking forward to profiling it more in the future. And hopefully we'll get some more support for this deck. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of Notification Squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.